This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Everybody, I'm going to welcome you back to another episode of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast Network. My name is Chris Blades, and before I get started here today, I want to make sure I take the time to remind you guys, as always, if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast, make sure you never miss an episode, make sure you're always on top of when we drop our latest stuff. Also, if you could please as well, give us a 5-star rating or a nice review, be very appreciated, very helpful, allows you to see what you guys like, what you guys dislike, the ways we can improve, all that fun stuff. And also, if you're on social media, we're on social media, so you can find us there. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We can talk, we can chat, we can debate, we can discuss. And I'm in the need of discussing something with you guys. I mean, obviously, we're on the podcast here. But, as you know, if you've been listening to this podcast for the last few months, especially during these Rona times, I've been pretty adamant on the sentiment that I don't think sports should be played under should not be played with the current state that the country is in. I have said many times that while I always knew they were going to get played because of money, I didn't think it was safe. I didn't think it was the best idea. Again, there's no real way to ensure no one gets corona, and then once that happens, then the floodgates kind of open. Like I said, we're not one of these countries in Europe or overseas where their cases are a lot lower. They're having real fans in there. I know like teams are going to try to have, well, not in the bubbles, but like in the non-bubble sports, they're going to try. They may some states may try to have fans. We'll see if it happens, but I know it's not necessarily off the table when it should be. But with all that being said, I must say that I am beginning to think that I'm beginning to think that sports during a pandemic might actually work. Now, I want to preface this by saying it is still very, very early on. Outside of like the MLS and obviously the NSL, I believe is the name of the women's soccer league in America. But yeah, outside of those, no other major... NWSL, excuse me. National Women's Soccer League. I got the acronym switched up. But yeah, so I would say outside of those, like no real major team sports are going on. Obviously, we've had NASCAR, we've had some golf events. But team-wise, there hasn't really been a whole lot of sports that have begun. Like I said, we got baseball starting this week. Basketball's going to do some of their scrimmage games. The WNBA starting up this weekend. NFL training camps are going to be people are reporting this week. So sports are getting back to the full swing. And with that being said, so far NHL is starting as well. And with that being said, so far the return from these bubbles is looking pretty good. It really is. So this was Field Yates. He's mainly he's ESPN guy. Does a lot of fantasy stuff. But he's kind of been, I don't want to say he's been keeping track, but he's been tweeting out different things during these Rona times. Just about trying to give them more, because obviously a lot of the news that's out there is negative because what's happening is not great. But every once in a while he sprinkles in some positive, when you hear about the vaccine or any sort of positive, semblance of positive news, usually out there tweeting about it, because again, his livelihood is based on sports, based on football being in season and being played. Not to say that he is that he doesn't understand the severity of the pandemic. But again, he like many of us. This is my opinion. I don't know Phil Yates. I've never met him. Don't talk to him. Don't communicate with him on Twitter. None of that stuff. So again, I could be all off base here. But from my opinion, it just seems like he, like many other people, would like to see sports happen this year. And like with that, even though, like I said, for a long period of time, I did not think it was the smartest thing to do, I understand from that perspective. But he tweeted out, I think this was yesterday, he tweeted out that today, the NBA reported 0 positive tests administered to 346 players, since last Wednesday. The NHL reported 2 positive tests out of 2618 tests. And obviously the NFL and NFLPA agreed to testing protocols, and the NFL offered 0 preseason games. Opening day is in 3 days. Sports progress. So, the main things I wanted to focus on here were the first 2 lines of his thing, which is that the NBA has reported administered 346 tests, and they've only had they had 0 positive tests come back, which is again a good sign. And this is kind of where you can understand why some states and some people are so adamant about putting in the proper protocols in place, because when you foster a safe environment, in theory there's nowhere for the virus to go. Like, again, if you're walking around, like I know everybody's indifferent on the CDC and how it works. Not how it works, but like what you should and shouldn't believe coming from them. But I know the CDC said that if everyone just wore masks for like 6 to 8 weeks, it would be like everywhere you went, you wore masks, like the virus would be basically eradicated from this country at least. And that's why when you see places like the NBA bubble where they're testing people every day, while they're trying to mandate face masks, even though Dwight Howard doesn't want to wear one. They're trying to mandate face masks. They're like, again, proper safety protocols. The people that are allowed to leave the bubble, which is again still my issue. Like some of the workers, like they're not stuck in the bubble, because in theory that's what you would want, is that you create this bubble to where as long as the coronavirus doesn't get in, you're good. But again, if you're allowing people to leave the bubble and come back in, then you're risking the coronavirus, and these people aren't quarantining. It's not like when the players necessarily, or when they leave, they're supposed to, if they're gone for a certain period of time, supposed to quarantine for a certain amount of days, stuff like that. So we'll see. I know Patrick Beverley just left today, I believe, to tend to a family matter. So we'll see what happens with him. I know Zion's not back yet. We'll see when he'll be back. I think Montrezl Harrell left too. So we've seen some players leave out of the bubble. But now that, again, like the exhibition games, these are kind of the scrimmage games starting back up. So the season's getting ready to start. So we'll see if these guys are able to. Again, if they can't, there should be no judgment on that, because family matters are more important than finishing a season. In my personal opinion, again, everyone's opinion on that may be different. But in my opinion, so it goes to show what could happen if the proper plans are in place. And that's why Dr. Fauci, again, if you want to listen to him, you can. If you don't, you don't. It's neither here nor there. But his idea was that sports could be played if there was the proper protocols in place. And it seems like so far, with the way they're testing people, the way that they're trying to keep things socially distant, I know they showcase the court, and like all the seats on the bench will be spread apart. They'll be normally like the 2 rows on top of each other. They're going to be spread out. Different things. Again, you're still playing on a court where no one's wearing masks and stuff, which I mean they can't. I guess still technically you could, because there's like fitness masks, but that was never going to happen. But again, in theory, if no one has the coronavirus, then you should be good. And like I said, that's what they're trying to get to. Just like, look, if we make sure everyone that comes through, again, because there's still it's going to be hard to say for certain that we're not going to go through the middle of October and no one's going to get it. Like, that seems kind of unlikely to me, but if you can limit to the amount of people, then you can complete your season, no problem. Like I said, the same thing with the NHL, with their bubble. Like I said, they had 2 positive tests out of the 2,600 they've done before their season starts back up. I know the MLS, they had some issues early on. The same with the In WSL, they had to have a team drop out, things like that. I know the WNBA, I don't really think they've had too many issues either. But yeah, you saw some things early, but now things are starting to settle in. People are starting to get the protocol starting to be locked down. People have done their little quarantining period. And again, like some people have had to leave, some people haven't been able to come yet. I know Russell Westbrook, I think, just got there today. I think he's supposed to get down to the bubble today because he had the COVID. Michael Beasley, who was signed with the Nets, had to leave. Eric Bledsoe, I know he took some time getting down there. James Harden took some time getting down there. So different players have had to take some time before they got down there. But it seems as if the NBA has a solid plan in place, which is, at this point, all you could ask for. And with that plan in place, and again, they're not the only one. A lot of these sports, with the way they're testing and how they're going to be testing, it seems as if a bubble atmosphere could work, again, as long as everyone's doing the right things, as long as no one's leaving the bubble, as long as no one's bringing people in from outside the bubble, things like that. And then we'll see what happens when the families come and see how easy it will be to keep them inside the bubble. Because again, with the players, they go to practice or they're playing a game, like there's only so much they have to do during the day. There's only so much they can do during the day. Well, with the people, the family members, the spouses, the partners, the kids, it's like you have to figure out something for them to do this whole time, and that might make things a little bit more tricky, at least to me personally. But yeah, so I want to give these bubbles credit so far. Like I said, so far relatively so good. Nothing really that major has come out of these bubbles yet. Like I said, I don't want anything to come out. That was always my point. I didn't want something to happen. It's just like, this is just what's happening. And especially when you're going down to Florida, where it's, again, still continuing to spike, it just seemed like an unreasonable thing to do. But like I said, if you can close yourself off in the outside world and just make sure everybody in this bubble doesn't have it, then you might be able to get the season off. Which is, again, why it's so bad that the MLB and like we talked about, the NFL, there was never really a way, and kind of the same with MLB. There's too many teams. You really can't play the games at the same time because not that many places have the facilities to play multiple games in a day, like the NBA does, where you can play like a game at 1, then play a game at like 5, then play a game at like 9. Like, that's just not a thing that you can do. And like, you can play them on different courts. Like, you can't do that. And there's not that many places you can do that. I mean, maybe you can do that at the MLB. I know some fancy smancy baseball complexes. At least when I was in high school and playing travel ball and stuff like that, they might have 3, 4, or 5 fields going at the same time. Well, but they weren't all the same size, and then you might only have like 2 or 3 like MLB size. But then again, that's one place, and like again, that's what, 12 teams. Then you got to get all those teams off and get another teams on, so that's another 12. Then you got to do it again for the games afterwards. Like I said, it's a lot more complicated than it would be in the MLB. I mean, in the NBA. And then, like I said, the NFL, it's been basically impossible. There's not enough places with enough fields for it to work. At least, again, that are already built. You have to literally build an entire thing, which would have taken too long to do. It would have been, not to say impossible, but would have been very difficult to do. Like I said, like they have like the practice courts and things. Like, they have them inside of ballrooms and like conference rooms, things like that. And down at the NBA bubble, like, you can't do that with a football field. You can't have a football field inside of a conference room. Like, that's just not gonna work. I mean, I guess technically you could, because like I imagine it could fit, but like it isn't. Like, it's gonna be weird, in my opinion. But yeah, so again, shout out to these sports leagues and shout out to these commissioners. Again, I was kind of dogging them a little bit for the way in which they're trying to get things started up during a pandemic, but I have to give them their credit when they do things right. And as of this point, it seems like they're doing things right. Again, we'll see how it holds. Hopefully I don't speak too soon. But yeah, it should be interesting. Like I said, the bubbles seem to be working so far, so that's a good sign. We're getting all sports back. Fingers crossed that everything goes smoothly and we don't have to shut down the seasons. That was also my biggest fear, is that you start up and have to shut it back down again. That's the worst case scenario. But if that doesn't happen, then they might be A-okay. And like I said, it just goes to show why the NFL and the MLB not playing in a bubble might not work out as well as some of these other sports leagues because, again, you got people traveling, you got people going here, going there, even with all the testing they're doing and stuff. It's still, you still have people staying in their home home cities. I don't know what the rules of these away cities. Like, I don't know if they're going to be allowed to leave, allowed to come, who's going to be allowed to come to their room, things like that. It's going to be a whole mess. So, those sports will be a little bit more interesting to watch, but in terms of the whole Rona situation. But for right now, like I said, the bubbles are working. So, hopefully that can continue. And speaking of bubbles and protocols and stuff, the NFL finally agreed to some protocols. I know it's not like, I don't know if they've all been like officially put in place. But the NFL, like I said, this is more than they had the last time we talked. When everyone was tweeting out, we want to play with the hashtag. And all the players were talking about how they had no plans in place and things like that. So at least that's the positive side. So we'll talk about all that stuff right after the break. So stay right there.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Back here again on the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So, this happened Monday. I believe, yes, Monday. The NFL and its players have reached an agreement on the testing aspect of their COVID-19 safety protocol as training camps get set to open over the next couple weeks. Or a couple days, really, because rookies are already starting to report for their testing. According to a memo obtained by ESPN and the NFL's Players Association will require daily testing for the first 2 weeks of training camp. After 2 weeks, if the positive test rate is below 5%, the league would scale back testing to every other day. If the positive test rate is not below 5%, they will continue with the daily testing until such a time as it falls below the number. If the positivity rate hits 5% or higher, at any point they go back to daily testing until it comes down. The league's chief medical officer, Dr. Alan Sills, said this is ongoing work. There's no finish line with health and safety, I should say. And I think these protocols are living, breathing documents, which means they will change as we get new information. They will undoubtedly be changing over time, which is what we usually see in medicine. Upon arriving to the team at the team facility for the first time, players and team employees, will be required to test negative twice before being allowed in. Basically, you show up on day one, take a test, go home. Then you wait 72 hours before taking a second test. If both are negative, you can go into the building and get to work on day 5. Recognize that as players and coaches and staff come in, they're going to be coming in from all over the country, and in some cases the world, so we want to take a slow approach here. The memo states that the testing rules and the 5% threshold will apply to all Tier 1 and Tier 2 employees for each team in the league. A memo sent out this was in early June, to define Tier 1 employees as all players and necessary personnel who must have direct access to players, and Tier 2 as all other essential personnel who may need to be in close proximity to players and other Tier 1 individuals, and who may need access to restricted areas. Still says the league's expectation is that test results will be back within 24 hours. The NFL is contracted with BioReference Laboratories to handle its tests and has said multiple times over the past several months that it wants to remain responsible about not taking about too large a share of the available tests in the market. So, again, this is on ESPN, so you can read the whole article if you wish. But that is at least a positive step in the right direction, because, again, that was part of what the players were fighting for, because the league always wanted to do it every other day, and the players were like, nah, that's not going to work. We need to do it every day, because like I said, that's what has going on in the NBA. I believe they're using the same testing, like whether, I don't know if it's the same laboratory, the same company, or whatever that the NBA is using. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure they are. And so then, like, all right, if they can do daily tests, why not have the NFL do daily tests? But I think the labs, I think that was the original problem, was that the lab wasn't sure they were going to be able to do tests every day because of the amount of people are going to have to test. Like, the NBA, all right, it's like 12 to 15 players, like, I don't know what, between coaches and training staff and things like that, like maybe an extra 10, max 15 guys. I don't even know if it's going to be that many. So, all right, so say just on the highest estimate, I mean, the highest, like, on this high guesstimate here, it's talking about 30 people for each team. So 30 people, you got 22 teams there. That is what? That is 660 people. Now, mind you, again, some players are already starting to get cut, but let's say, cause I know there's also some talk about maybe trimming the roster down to 80 for training camps and stuff, just so you have less people in. So say you do that. So say you have 80 people, do that with 32 teams. That is over 2,500 players alone, and that before you get to the staff and the coaches and anyone else, like, again, any of these tier 1 or tier 2 employees. So we're talking about over what, probably like, if not over, then close to 3,000 people that need to be tested every day. Then you need to take those tests and get them back within 24 hours. Like I said, that unfortunately, that does seem a little unlikely, so I understand why you want to do in the beginning, because again, you just want to make sure everyone's on top of their stuff. And then again, as you see the positivity rate fall a little bit, because I mean, people are going to test positive. That's just how it's going. A lot of people are asymptomatic. A lot of people don't even know that they have it. So when teams and players and rookies, like I said, rookies already started reporting. Quarterbacks and other veterans will start to report a little bit later in the week. The whole team will be reported by next week for all these teams. So once that happens, you're going to see people test positive. It is what it is. It's unfortunate, but again, you just get out the way. So there is that. But yeah, so like I said, it just makes a lot of sense for their aspect, at least like I said in the beginning, to test every day, just you can kind of just start to weed out everybody that has it or test positive for it. So then again, you can start getting them quarantined and everything, because then with that, then you have to wait the 10, 14, how many every days they decide to wait before they can even get back in the building. Then again, I'm assuming they have to take a couple more tests, make sure they're negative before they even get allowed back in the building. So you want to get that started and get that done as soon as possible. If they test positive, again, there's a chance they're going to test negative, and then they might test positive later on. But at least for now, you want to get the stuff out the way as quickly as possible. And kind of going along those same lines, the NFL also, I believe, axed all preseason games this year, which is another thing that the players, from their standpoint, they wanted. So this is good for them, these negotiations. They were able to get a lot of the things that they, in fact, wanted, as opposed to kind of bending to the will of the owners. But in this case, like I said, they were able to get the things that they wanted. So they didn't get everything, as we'll talk about in a second. But like I said, no preseason games. That kind of, at this point, makes sense. Because, a lot of these teams need... Well, not a lot of these teams. Every team needs time to get back up to speed. Because, again, you had no real mini camps. You had no real OTAs. No real, like I said, off-season workouts of any kind together as a whole team. So you need to make sure you get everybody back in shape. Make sure you try to limit the injuries as much as you can, which is why I believe, like I said, we'll go through the schedule a little bit of how the schedule for the training camp is going to work for most of these teams. But you got to get that up to speed. Then you got to get like the rookies acclimated. You got to get the new additions acclimated. Got to get, like I said, you got to start installing things, working on things that you may want to do differently this season. Like, all that has to be done within about a month or so, a month plus, so that you can be ready to be on the field and start playing early September. And then on top of that, you got to deal with potentially people getting the Rona, because it's going to happen. And then having to quarantine for 14 days, so now you got to get another guy up to speed. Then you got to try to figure out how you can fit them back in. If it's like a rookie or a new addition that tests positive, now they haven't been with the team, they haven't been with the system, or even like it's a new coach. So even if it's like a returning player or some teams that have new coaches or new quarterbacks, whatever, even if there's returning players, now they haven't worked with this quarterback. Or they haven't worked with this coaching staff. They haven't worked with this offensive playbook. Haven't worked with the defensive playbook. Again, they have it because they use it in the offseason, but they haven't done it together with everybody there on the field at the same time. So you're losing reps there. And like I said, this is why it's going to be, all sports in general are going to be so much different this year than they've ever really been. But yeah, so from those two standpoints, like I said, you got a lot of things to work on. So I mean, having a preseason game and throwing in there, while you would want to see your people against another team, like I get why people would want preseason games, especially again, and also it's just a chance for them to get a little bit more TV money if they have the games broadcast on national. I mean, most of them aren't, like usually they're like NFL Network or something. They're not like any like the big I guess other than like locally they're like on like the Fox or the CBS or whatever, I think. But other than that, they're not on like ESPN. They're not like, you don't have the prime analyst stuff like that. But at the same time, again, you just want to see your players against another team. That's who you're going to play. You're not going to play against yourself once the regular season starts. So like I said, I get from their standpoint, but from a player standpoint, they got to get their bodies ready. And also, if I'm going to risk injury and I'm going to risk that Rona, I'm going to do it for a game that matters. I'm sorry. I'm not risking it for a game that's literally meaningless at the end of the day. No matter how much or how badly or things like that we may need it, to my opinion, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to risk it there. And again, it seems like the NFL agree with the players in that standpoint. So going back to how the schedule will be broken down. So this is from Ian Rappaport. He tweeted this out earlier Tuesday. He said, "What would training camp be like under the NFL's latest ramp-up proposal?" Again, if it's passed. Testing and physicals for 5 to 6 days, as we already discussed. Strength conditioning plus walkthroughs through day 12 of training camp. Off on day 13. Then you work out through helmets through day 18. Have another day off. Then on the 20th day of training camp is when you can start putting the pads on. So it's a lot different. Normally, again, you're getting physicals and maybe stuff done and maybe do a couple of days of strength conditioning. But you're on the field doing stuff a couple of days in, and like you said, by week 2, maybe week 3 at the latest, you already have pads on. And you're hitting. And like I said, that might even be too long before they put the pads on. And the funniest thing is Tom Pelissero, he retweeted this and said that for comparison, the NFLPA had pushed based on Joint Medical Committee recommendation for 21 days of strength conditioning, then 10 days of non-padded work. So still a substantial difference in how soon pads would go on. So again, this is a total, if you count in the 2 off days, I would imagine, because I imagine they would put some off days in there. So that's 33 days before pads get put on, at the minimum. This one is only about 20. So again, we're talking about an extra maybe 1.5, 2 weeks. So that you can get, like, again, guys, that's the biggest thing for these players and these people is going to be, is just like, can you get your body right so that you're not risking injury? Because that's kind of what you hope for. You don't want to hurt these players, hurt your team by getting these people out there and doing things they shouldn't be doing that quickly. Again, it's unfortunate, but everyone's going to take it a little bit slower with this training camp, because again, you want to have those major injuries. I mean, there's already going to be some anyway. That's just how training camp works. But you don't want to have more than necessary, like more of the soft tissue, like hamstrings, thighs, quads, calves, things like that. You don't want to have more injuries there, because then again, those things can take long to heal up and can linger around and stuff like that. So you hope everybody's been staying in shape, which they have. But again, being in good shape and being in football shape are not necessarily the same thing. So, like I said, most of these guys have been working out. They've been running. They've been doing different things, running routes, working on things like that. So they might not be in like bad like cardiovascular shape. Like they might be great there, but again, you might not be in football shape with all the quick movements and trying to guard people and run with people and run routes and do things like that. Even though again, a lot of these people have been working on that, but it's different once you do it against defenses and are trying to get open away from people, things like that. Like the muscles got to work a little bit differently, in my personal opinion. So, like I said, you don't want to risk any injuries dealing with that, because then that'll really set your team back on top of whatever you got to deal with that Rona. So, it'll be interesting to see how this training camp will go down. And speaking of that, as we already talked about or touched on a little bit, the NFL talking about potentially cutting down the training camp roster from 90 down to 80 guys. Just with that, I wanted to talk about like the NFL I already touched on how some players are already getting cut before training camps even start. So I want to talk about that and how different this training camp is going to be from a player standpoint, and also just how it could affect some of these players' careers, because a lot of careers are made in the preseason or made in training camp, things like that. So we'll touch on all that right after this break. So stay right there.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we are back here again on the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So, as I said, I want to touch on the NFL cuts and NFL training camp and how I think it's going to be different and how I think it's going to have an effect on a lot of players and their careers and potentially some futures in the NFL. But before I did that, I wanted to, again, shout out to Field Yates. He had another interesting tweet that said, again, this one was from earlier to Tuesday. It said close to 31% of players on NFL active rosters in 2019 entered the league as undrafted free agents. Preseason games and OTAs were a massive platform, for them to showcase that they had a spot in the NFL. Making a roster as an undrafted free agent this season will be a huge achievement. And with that being said, and with, like I said, it was seeing how there's going to be like they already talked about, no preseason games. Like I said, training camp's it's gonna be 20 days minimum before you can even put full pads on and start hitting guys. I honestly do agree with him that it'll be very difficult for any of those fringe guys, any of those borderline guys to make the roster, because again, I don't think they're gonna have enough time to showcase themselves. I mean, again, training camp practices, if you've ever kind of kept up with them, or like follow, like whichever team you follow, like follow some of the tweets from the beat reporters and beat writers and stuff like that. Again, you see a lot of names that go through the practice, and I mean, you see a lot of names that like get time on the field. You got the ones working with the ones, working on the ones, 2s and 2s, 3s and 3s, and you got one-on-one drills and everything. So you see a lot of guys get chances, but a lot of these guys can really separate themselves and showcase themselves as potential legitimate NFL players during these mini camps, during the summer, during OTAs, coming back from OTAs, taking what they learned, taking what they got from there, going into training camp, seeing if they've gotten bigger, faster, stronger, slower, way more, but not, like I said, not in a good way. See whatever teaching tools or learning tools you try to give them in the spring or in the summer to work on when training camp starts back up. Now, like I said, they still have some of that, because again, I know some, like, you're doing things virtually, so again, people start talking with them, trying to coach them through things, but it's not the same as being on the field. And with that, they didn't have a chance to showcase themselves on the field, because again, a lot of times these guys can like show, like, all right, this guy was tearing it up in the spring, or this guy was doing really well, or this guy was unblockable, this guy was making interception all over the field, this guy was making diving one-handed catches, catching the ball over everybody, beating up on our number one corner, stuff like that. you won't have these stories this year. Well, you don't have these stories this year, at least coming out of the spring, because they don't exist, because there wasn't a spring. Or a summer, whatever you want to call it. There wasn't a real mini camp. There wasn't real OTAs. So again, a lot of those stories aren't going to happen. And the same thing, I think, when you come to training camp, because a lot of these guys, obviously they showcase stuff in practice and stuff, but then you want to see it translate to the game. You want to see it translate to when you're not playing your own team, where you kind of know what they do, know their tendencies, know the defense they like to run, know the people you're going up against. So it may be a little bit easier. Not to say it's easy, because again, these are all NFL players at the end of the day. But it could be easier if you're going up against the same guy, for a week straight. You might, like I said, by maybe day 1, 2, and 3, you might be struggling, but day 4, 5, 6, you might be like, all right, he likes to do this, or when I'm in this position, he likes to do that, or when I'm running this route, he likes to do this, he likes to do that. So you can kind of like learn from that, and like I said, you may get better. But then again, when you're going up in a game situation against another team, you don't know what they're going to do. Necessarily. You have, like, again, no one's really coming up with exotic defensive game plans or offensive game plans in the preseason. But still, you don't know this team's playbook. You know that they may know some of their tendencies from last year, but maybe they're changing things up. Maybe they're trying to do new things. Maybe they got new players, different things like that. So everything's a little different. And these preseason games, especially like the first one, and then that fourth one, really, because again, the middle two were when the starters played more. Though in recent years, they'd really only been playing in that third preseason game if they played at all, because some teams weren't having their guys play at all during the preseason, because again, it's really more so for those borderline guys. If you're an NFL caliber player, you don't really need the games. And again, if you get hurt, then it's like, you got hurt in a meaningless game. Like, that's the worst. And so with that being said, now with those gone, what do these borderline guys have to go off of to try to make a roster? How are they going to do it? Again, practice is going to help, but you don't know what they look like in a game situation yet. No matter who it's against, whether against 1s, 2s, 3s, it doesn't really matter. You don't know what they're like in a game situation. Not even really going to be able to scrimmage other teams, I don't think. We'll see if they ease up on that, but because at least the MLB, they let you have they had the little scrimmage games before the season started, little spring training, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, so they at least had something that where you're facing opposing pitchers or you're facing opposing batters. Like, you're not just going up against the same guys in inter-squad scrimmages the whole time. And it sounds like the same thing the NBA is doing. They're having exhibition or scrimmage games before they start their, or they finish, quote-unquote, their regular season. And in the NFL, it sounds like they're just going to go right from training camp into the season. And it's like, that's not really a good way to gauge anybody, let alone, like I said, these borderline guys, which is where who training camp really can benefit and the preseason really can benefit, and who, in turn, is really going to hurt. Because, again, not to say it's going to be impossible to make the team, because, again, there's going to be a lot of injuries, stuff like that, so people are going to make the team that potentially, I think there's going to be a lot of injuries. I don't know. What you would think is there's going to be a little bit more injuries than there might have been in most other seasons, or just even in general, there's always injuries. So, guys are going to be on the roster that may not have officially been on the roster had the top 53 players made it, based on who you have on your roster right at this moment. Like I said, you're not going to hear a lot of these as many stories. I don't think this year of like a late round guy or an undrafted guy kind of working his tail off all off season, coming into training camp, killing it, shutting things down in the preseason game, dominating whatever they have to do, and then making the roster that initial 53 or even the 53 after the waivers. And we'll talk about the waivers in a second, but I'm saying it's a shame, really. And again, it makes total sense. It's not anybody's fault that this has to happen, but it's just like, again, it's a shame because you're missing out on a lot of those key contributors, because like I said, like Field said, a good majority of your team is made up of not only just undrafted guys, but not top round guys. So we're talking about like the day 3 guys, like 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th rounders. That's who the majority of your team is. Plus the undrafted guys. Like, that's who the majority of most teams are. Like, they're not everybody's team is made up. Not everybody can be the Falcons and have an offense of all first round picks, or former first round picks, I should say. Like, that just doesn't happen that often. And most times you have a late round guy here, a late round guy there, a guy that surprise people here, surprise people there. And I'm saying now you're gonna have a season where it's gonna be hard for them to do that, because again, you're trying to get people up to speed as quickly as you can. And you got to do that for the starters. that you throw, or at least the potential started, because then that's who, in theory, is going to be out there once the season starts up in September. Like, you gotta think, like, all right, who do we think is realistically going to make the roster? And who do we think is really going to have legitimate impact on our team or with our team this season? We need to get these guys up to speed, because, again, you didn't have any real offseason. We don't have time, even though, again, there's a lot of guys that they signed as undrafted free agents, or they drafted them for a reason, or they brought them in for a reason. Because you think, all right, this guy can be something for our team. So you're not just going to say you're not going to try to have him do anything, but like I said, you gotta prioritize where you're going to give this playing time to. And in theory, you're going to want to give it most to the starters, because, again, that's who's going to be out there. So it's going to be hard for these guys to really showcase themselves, and they're going to do it in little bits and spurts, but I'm saying that might not... It's going to hard to get a full gauge of how good or bad they are in that limited time, especially when you're going against the same people over and over and over again. Even if you're an undrafted guy and you get some reps with the ones, like, again, you're still the similar offense. Again, the players are better, but it's like nothing's all that different. That's why the preseason games are really ways to showcase themselves, because then you can see, like, all right, this guy's a man amongst boys at this in these 2s-on-2s or 3s-on-3s. So, like, all right, maybe with some work he could do something versus the ones. I'm saying he's going to miss out on a lot of those cool stories this year. Guys like literally earning themselves a roster spot in training camp or in the off season. And again, that's how a lot of careers are made. Started like that, and then again you continue to work, and then you're in the NFL for 5-10 years. And I think this year is going to be one of those weird years where those guys aren't really going to have that opportunity. Again, it's not like it's going to be impossible. But then also, like I said, I wanted to touch on the waivers. Some guys, again, they get signed from other teams to other teams' practice squad, or they get picked up off waivers. And I'm like, how are you going to do? I'm not to say you can't do waivers, but unless there was a guy that you really wanted to take a look at, and now he gets cut, like, how are you going to view waivers? You're not going to have your game film. You're going to go off of your pre-draft assumption or some intel you got from them from, like, free agency or whatever. Like, how are you going to gauge who you should pick up in waivers, or will there be really anyone picked up in waivers this year? Because, again, you see, like, all right, actually, I do really well in your training camp. Unfortunately, just a numbers game, he just got cut, so he doesn't make it. But then he gets picked up somewhere else because, again, he had a great preseason. Like, all right, or like even like I know because the Eagles had to sign a bunch of guys because everybody was hurt last year. I know they signed at least one or two defensive linemen that they liked that had great preseasons. With I think one was I forget if they were both named Albert. But I know the one last name was Huggins and one's last name was Anthony Rush, I think, and it was Albert Huggins. And I forget which one was with the Raiders. One of those two guys was with the Raiders, and he had like an amazing like preseason. Like everyone was surprised that he didn't make the initial roster, and he was on their practice squad for a while. Then they ended up signing him because they had some intel on him, and they saw like he played really well. And again, you're not going to have that this year. So I'm saying you're just going to be flying blind in all these additions, and I'm saying that's just really a shame because again, it's going to hurt some of these lower tier guys in terms of like again where they were picked. Because again, in theory, you're going to prioritize your first round pick. You're going to prioritize your second round pick. Make sure they get the time because you think maybe even your third or fourth, just because you think these guys are going to be contributors to your team this year. But these 5th, 6th, 7th rounders that again are going to make up your special teams, are going to make up the back end of your roster. They're kind of out of luck when it comes to playing time because they don't have time to showcase themselves other than in practice, which again is going to be a slow grind anyway. You're only going to put pads on the 20th day, so you're hitting for the first time almost 3 weeks into training camp, if not longer. I'm going to say by that point you got a couple weeks before the regular season starts. Oh, well, like I guess like 4 weeks before the regular season starts, maybe even less at that point. I don't know exactly when the dates line up. I mean, you might have like a couple weeks till the regular season starts. You don't have time to be working guys in or trying to see stuff like that. You got to get everybody ready for the season because you weren't able to do that in the offseason, at least in my opinion. We'll see what happens. But in my opinion, you don't have time for, like, oh, let's give this guy a shot, or let's see if this guy can do or that guy can do. You're like, all right, you got to give the reps to the guys that are going to be playing on your team, you think, because that's who you're going to need during the season, and you got to get them ready. Because they haven't had the chance to get ready up until this time. So, it'll be very interesting to see how training camp plays out this year. and like who makes the teams and who gets cut, stuff like that, because it's just going to be hard for these long shot guys to really earn their spot in training camp. That's where a lot of them earn their spot, training camp and preseason. And now there is no preseason. You just have training camp, and it's just practice. You don't even got scrimmages against other teams. So, it's, like I said, it's an unfortunate situation. Hopefully it won't be a one-year endeavor, but for this year, it's going to hurt a lot of guys. It's going to hurt a lot of guys, which, like I said, is unfortunate. This is where we're at. It is what it is. Like I said, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Things are weird. 2020 is weird. There's not much you can do. Like I said, hopefully there's still some cool stories that come out of these training camps of guys, like, again, put on good performances and good shows in training camp and making a roster as a long shot. But that's going to be much, much harder to do. And that, again, that's before you even get down to the fact they might already bring in 10 less guys from the jump to be there. So now you're already cutting down on some guys that could have potentially been in that position. I know the Eagles cut one corner that I know he was good for like a half a year or like a year with, I think they were still the San Diego Chargers at the time. Like 2016, 2017, Trevor Williams, a corner. People thought, oh, he might be a good depth guy, something like that. And there, he already got cut because like we're not going to have the time to see how good you are. And again, they cut other guys too. But maybe, I don't know, maybe he wasn't that good in off-season workouts, whatever. Who knows? But I'm saying, we're not even going to waste our time. We're going to make sure the people we bring to training camp, we think have a legitimate shot to make this roster. And I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But like I said, it's just unfortunate. You're not going to hear some of these cool long shot stories that we normally get to do during these times. And speaking of, again, having to spend a lot of time getting people ready for the season, there's a chance that there could be, and this isn't just a football thing, there could be some early season struggles in these sports getting ready to start back up. Mainly, again, we're not going to talk about the NBA because they already played most of their season. It's a similar thing with the NHL. They played a majority of their season, so this isn't really like early season. It's just like restart season. But when you're talking about, actually you'd even say for MLS, but when you're talking about and MLB, and when you're talking about the NFL, we could see some people struggle out the gate. So I'll talk about like why I think that is and how I think it may work, stuff like that. All that right after break. So stay right there.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
GSMC Podcast Network. So, we kind of touched on this a little while ago, talking about the different sports and like, how are they going to come back? How are they going to look? People are going to get injured, stuff like that. But now that more sports are officially back, because again, that was all just like preliminary for when we thought sports would be coming back, other than I think it was the NBA might have officially been back at that time, if anything. But yeah, so now we've seen some of these like fake spring training games, and we've seen, we know the training camp protocol and how it's all going to go down in the NFL. I just wanted to give some thoughts on how I think the early season could play out in both of those sports. Start with baseball. It's either going to go one of two ways for a lot of players, teams, etc. Either their offense is going to be amazing and their pitching is going to have to catch up, or their pitching's going to be like amazing and the offense is going to have to catch up. Because I think that's where we're at. When you've seen, if you've been watching, some of these like scrimmage games, or keeping up to date with some of these like scrimmage games, or like I said, these fake spring training games that have been going on over the weekend, and have been going on leading up and getting to the start of the season. You see some guys are ready. Some guys, maybe not so much. I know, for example, Max Scherzer got hit around a little bit by the not Nationals. He's on the Nationals. By the Phillies. I think Bryce Harper took him deep. Someone else took him deep too. I forget who it was. I thought someone else. I know Bryce Harper. I'm pretty sure took him deep, and someone else took him deep too. It was bad. He looked a little shaky. And now, like I said, the season's about to start. We don't got that many games. Who else? I know the Cubs looked a little shaky. Well, and then in the inverse, the White Sox looked. Their offense seemed to be completely ready to go for the season. Again, not to say they were putting up 15, 20 runs, anything like that, but it seemed like their guys were ready to go, or are ready to go for the season. And like I said, they could be one of the. If I was going to do like a surprise teams or on the rise teams, I feel like they could definitely be one of those teams. Because I think I kind of talked about them a little bit a couple weeks ago. But, again, they got made a bunch of additions. They got a lot of young guys. So you would think, all right, if they were in some... I mean, again, you don't know if we can get the corona again. But, like, Yohan Moncada, he was a guy that is expected to be a part of that youth movement in Chicago for the White Sox. And he dealt with corona already, and now he's coming back. So, hopefully he doesn't get it again this quickly. But you kind of just like, somebody's going to come through, and it's going to hit every team at a different time. And I know the White Sox dealt with it a little bit earlier on, and now they're getting some of their guys back for the start of the season. I know he looked good in his first game back. He had nice play in the field. He's looking like that whole offense has looked good. Eloy Jimenez has looked good. I know Tim Anderson came back. He was looking good. They're there. That was my main point. But yeah, I just think when you look at these different teams, a lot of the situation is going to go one or two ways, I believe. I mean, some things are just going to be awful. Like, they're not going to be able to... Well, I mean, I don't say one or two ways, but like there's going to be either a lot of really good hitting, and thus a lot of really bad pitching, or there's going to be a lot of really bad pitching, really good pitching and really bad hitting. Because, again, everyone's timing is going to be a little bit different. Everyone's readiness is going to be a little bit different. Like, the thing about spring training, is you got a month worth of games, and I mean they had spring training, but again it's a little different now, because now they got a few games and they're getting the season started. But so you had like a month, you had a bunch of people you could work through, you could work on different things. Now you basically just got to be in game mode, be ready to go. Like I said, it starts this week. You got to be ready to go from the jump. And with the 60-game season, you really don't have time to have a slow start. And you really could build a lot of, I don't know if equity is the right word, but build a lot of space between you and the other teams in your division if you get off to a fast start. So I'm saying that's why it'll be vital to try to get off to a fast start. But at the same time, like I said, I think there are going to be pitchers that just aren't ready to pitch yet. Like the velocity's not there yet. The breaking balls aren't breaking as much as they would want. Though again, usually some pitchers, like, they take some little bit of time to get into gear, and then they get by the middle of the season they're in good shape, and this would be the middle of the season, so you think at least maybe their arms are feeling good. But also a lot of these guys towards the end of spring training, in many cases they go through a dead arm period where, like, all right, I'm ready to go, like my arm's a little bit tired, and I'm just gonna sit out and then get ready for the regular season. Now we're talking about having that happen by like the 6th, 7th game, something like that, where you really can't afford it. Like if you're going through the middle of your schedule and your arm's tired, you're kind of out of luck. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to monitor, just like, all right, who are the teams that were ready and who are the teams that weren't ready? Again, you're going to see some You're going to see some teams get off the hot starts, get off the fast starts. You're going to see some teams struggle. All because, again, pitching and hitting. And man, defense a little bit too, but I feel like that the timing with that and the work on that is a little bit easier to get through than, like I said, the pitching. If your stuff's not there and your stuff's not ready, yeah, it's going to be bad for you early in the season before you like tinker with some things, figure some things out. And the same thing with hitting. If your timing's not there yet, it's going to be a struggle. So it'll be interesting to kind of look into that and, like I said, see how that plays out with different teams and different franchises. Just again, because of the condensed season, you kind of really can't afford to have that slow start. But it seems like I said, not seems like, but teams are gonna start off fast, teams are gonna start off slow. It's just gonna happen. Point blank period. That's just how the 60 game, especially during a heightened season. I mean, a shortened season where everything's gonna be heightened and everything matters that much more. There are gonna be teams, games, situations where brothers just aren't ready yet. It's unfortunate, but that's what happens when you only have a 60 game season. You don't really have a whole lot of time to get ready. You didn't have that many spring training games or whatever. Like, you just got a couple games, like, all right, I guess I'm good, and we just gonna go out there, see what happens, and hopefully you're good once the bright lights are officially on. So we'll see about that. And then, like I said, going to the football side, I think there's a similar thing. There's either going to be, I think there might just be, football-wise, there might just be bad football in general. The first month of the season is already kind of shaky, but it might be even worse. Because we're talking about guys not being able to hit, not being able to tackle, really, until the first week, until like a couple weeks in. So we're talking about sometime in August. They're tackling for the first time. And like maybe mid-August they're tackling for the first time. And again, they have a mid-August, you have games in a month. Or less than a month by that point. So we're talking about that. Before they even, like I said, that's even before they start to hit, let alone actually go through practice where you're hitting guys. So you got to deal with that. Then you got on the offensive side, you got to deal with guys not having, and again, unless you're a team like the Chiefs that basically returned their entire starters, you're going to deal with new guys. You got to get new guys in, get them maybe in a new position, up to speed. Like you traded for some guys, you got rookies coming and things like that. Like, you got to get that chemistry down. And again, you saw players working out with people and doing things on the side, whether they should or shouldn't have is a different story. But they were doing things. They're trying to get that chemistry down with some of their guys. But now you got to spend all that time that you would have spent in the spring, would have spent during this off period between mandatory minicamp and training camp working on that chemistry. Now you got to do all that in about like a month and change to get ready for the first game. So I feel like you're going to see a lot of bad offense. You're going to see a lot of bad defense. Which, I mean, that's kind of weird because, like, you can't have bad offense with bad defense. Like those two things are good. Like, if your defense is bad, that means the offense is doing well. Just like if the offense is bad, then the defense is doing well. But I think there's going to be a lot of ugly games. And like I said, the concept's weird, but there's going to be a lot of ugly games. Well, point by period. There's going to be a lot of ugly games that first month or so of the season. Just because, again, by the time these players will get to week one, that'll be the first time they're facing another opponent since the end of last year, whenever their last game of their season was. So it'll be, I mean, for everybody but the Chiefs and the Niners, it'll be at least, okay, we're talking about, so they were in February. March, April, May, June, July, August, September. So that was talking about 7 months before you face another team for the first time. And it's live and it matters and stuff like that. That's just for them. That's not talking about guys that missed the playoffs, got teams that were basically eliminated before December hit. I'm talking about teams that lost in the playoffs in January. Like, for them, it's even longer. If you're talking about like a team like the Giants, like the Bengals or stuff like that, like they haven't had a meaningful game, really. And by the time the season starts, it's been over in almost like 10 months. Like, how do you, and again, no off season. So on top of the fact they haven't played a meaningful game in like 10 months, they will have had no off season to get themselves up to speed for that first game. And they got a new head coach. So again, I'm not just to pick on the Giants, but like you get my point, is that like there's going to be a lot of shaky stuff early in the year because these guys haven't had time to work on anything on the field wise as a team. Again, you could have worked on, I'm going to get bigger, I'm going to get stronger and do these things, work on those things here and there, but they haven't had a chance to implement it yet and see how it works in a game setting or against a different team. Because again, at the end of the day, you're not playing your own offense. You're not playing your own defense in these games. You're playing 16 different teams with 16 different game plans, 16 different personnels, 16 different head coaches. Like everything's different. I suppose again, they're gonna only practice they're gonna have for the lead up to that is playing their own people. Again, assuming they don't throw in any scrimmages, which they, I mean, honestly, wouldn't shock me if they did. If the test results are kind of low and stuff like that, it wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting. Like I said, or like we already kind of discussed, the NBA is a similar situation. Like the beginning game, those first 8 games, it's just gonna be see who can knock the rust off the quickest, honestly. But at least, and same thing with kind of the NHL, but they go right to the playoffs. But at least with them, like, all right, you have a few games before like the playoffs hit. Well, in the NBA, you have a few games before the playoffs hit, so you can work out some kinks, work on some things, stuff like that. Make sure your chemistry's up to stuff. The MLB guy, they said they gave you all a couple inter squad games, a couple exhibition games, and like, look, hopefully y'all ready because we got these games to play. So we gonna find out soon enough. And then the NFL is just, I mean, and rightfully so, but they're just like, hey, look, y'all wanted no preseason, right? That's what y'all wanted? All right, cool. Y'all don't got no preseason, but hopefully y'all not looking shaky when the season starts. Because you're going to be on your own. Like, hopefully y'all work on a lot of stuff, a lot of good stuff in training camp, because week 1 is the first time you're going to be seeing a different opponent for the first time. And yeah, I think it's going to be that the first month in a lot of these sports is going to be kind of a mess. Because again, everyone's just trying to get, especially in these sports that were supposed to start and didn't start, or weren't able to do all the off-season stuff properly. Like you're trying to get back up to speed. You're not even trying to again, you're not worried about the playoffs. Like you're just trying to get people through the games healthy. And like I said, just playing at a decent level. That's what you're worried about at that point. You're not even worried about anything else yet. And like once you get there, you get there. But like I said, you gotta just get through the first part first and hope that people make it there. Well, NFL wise, make it to the regular season healthy, and then once they're there, hopefully they're ready to go. Because if not, your season's gonna be over before you know it. Like I said, I mean, you'll see. I guess MLB fans will see kind of what it's, if you don't watch NFL things like that, you'll see what it's like to be an NFL fan. Because where you get off to, you start 1-3, you start 0-4. Barring a reeling off a 10-game winning streak, your season's probably over. Like, in terms of making the playoffs. Even with the extra playoff seed this year, it's going to be tough. Because, again, you're already in the hole. Same thing, like, if a team starts out the first month, they go 7-18 or something like that. I don't know how many games they're going to play. But, like, say they play 25 games. Nah, that's probably too. Like, say they play like 20 games. So if you go, 5-15, I don't know if there's enough time for you to make up the games. But yeah, it should be interesting. I'm going to be tuned into that this weekend. And like I said, as we go through training camp, stuff like that as well, just to see, how are these teams going to come out early in the season? Or how these pitchers or how these hitters are going to come out early in the season. Because that'll really be the indicator on how successful these teams are during the years. Who can get off to the best starts? But regardless. And then we're going to see some shaky whatever. Shaky baseball, shaky football, shaky basketball. Everything's just going to be shaky, at least in the beginning. We'll get through it, and eventually, again, these guys are professionals. They're the best at their sport. They'll get through it, but for those first couple weeks, it's going to be rough. Because then brothers just haven't played. They just haven't played in a long time. So, hopefully it's not too bad, but like I said, I'm not really anticipating a whole lot good, necessarily. Depending on what's good. If you like seeing 13-10 games, and then alright, then you're in good shape. But if you like seeing the 2-1 pitchers duels, I think those may be a little few and far between, at least based off what I've seen in these exhibition games. We'll see what happens in the regular season. So in these exhibition games, Buzz getting hit. Unless you're the Mets, then you can't get a hit like they did against they can't score runs like they did against the Yankees this weekend. But again, most other teams they was able to put some runs on the board fairly easy. Again, these pitchers they haven't pitched. They haven't pitched against real batters in a long time. They got to work through stuff. But yeah, I don't want to ramble on too much more about that. But yeah, it should be interesting to say the least. And speaking of interesting, there is a new professional team, it seems like, coming to LA. So I'll talk about which team that is, the ownership group behind that team, how it came about and everything, and just why I think it's a really cool situation to be going on for not only just that league, but for LA sports in general. So we'll talk about all that right after the break. Stay right there.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So, LA, Los Angeles, the city of angels, like I said, is getting a new professional team. And this team is going to be part of the NWSL, or the National Women's Soccer League. This is from Sports Illustrated, but again, this was all over like LA Times, ESPN, so you could read any article, anywhere. I'm just reading that. I picked the one from Sports Illustrated. I was just, I don't know, I was feeling it. So yeah, the NWSL is expanding to Los Angeles, and it is doing so in a very LA way. A loaded ownership group that features a slew of former U.S. women's national team stars, including Mia Hamm, Abby Wambach, Julie Foudy, and Lauren Holiday. Celebrities including Natalie Portman, Eva Longoria, Jessica Chastain, Jennifer Gardner, and Uzo Aduba. And industry leaders including Kara Nortman, Julie Ehrman, and Alex Ohanahan, the Reddit guy. I don't know if I pronounced the last name. I think Serena's in on this too, which I didn't mention. Which, I mean, that is what it is, but that's unfortunate. And many more, which I guess Serena's included in the many more. She should get her own thing, but that's neither here nor is it there. Will steward the league's 2022 expansion team in the city, which for now is going by the moniker Angel City. The LA team will become the NWSL's 11th after Racing Louisville FC joins in 2021. The growing trajectory of the NWSL is incredibly exciting, but we also needed to be strategic and thoughtful about how fast we expand and the communities we partner with. New NWSL Commissioner Lisa Byard said in a statement, "We long sought the right partner in LA, considering the NWSL fan base that already exists in the region and the massive interest in women's soccer in general. Those factors, along with an incredible ownership group, make this an ideal situation, and we continue to be thrilled to move forward." While Hamm is involved, there is no indication that the MLS's LAFC, which has its own Starlight ownership group, of which she is a part of, is backing the project. The MLS's, excuse me. So yeah, we don't know if they're partnered with them in any way. It's unclear where the new team will play and whether perhaps LAFC's Bank of California Stadium or the LA Galaxy's Dignity Health Sports Park will be its home venue. According to the LA Times, Ehrman, a media and gaming entrepreneur, and the Galaxy have been in conversation regarding a role with the club. Bank of California Stadium was the site of the April 2019 friendly between the U.S. Women's National Team and Belgium, one attended by Portman, Longoria, Chastain, Gardner, and Aduba, which is actually kind of funny. I saw that clip floating around. They all had like jerseys on. So that's like kind of funny that I guess they were probably, I don't know if that's when they started the plan or they were kind of just moving the plan along, like, oh, let's go see the game, let's go see how the stadium looks, things like that. But that is kind of interesting that 5 of the people that ended up being a part of this ownership group were at a game in LA just last year. That's kind of funny. Their involvement with the game in the city clearly was not limited to that appearance. Yeah, I think the women's national team tweeted that out, the video out. So you can see that there. Today we take an exciting today we take an exciting step announcing the first women majority-owned and led ownership group, Portman said. I am thrilled by the opportunity to partner with this incredible group of people to bring a professional women's soccer team to Los Angeles. Together we aim to build not only a winning team on the field, but also develop a passionately loyal fan base. He goes on to say a little bit more, but again, don't want to bog you down with too much stuff. But yeah, so the ownership group also includes what has to be a first in sports, a 2-year-old, the daughter of the tennis icon and club investor Serena Williams, and the leading founding investor and Reddit co-founder Ohanahan. Alexis Olympia Ohanahan is also listed in the ownership group. The number is more than 30 people. That's kind of interesting. I mean, that's kind of smart, though. I mean, if you're rich, right, and you're going to be like, all right, let's just put my kid's name on this business so that when the time comes, they have some money already built in, and they already have something they could do. If you want to take over and become, be more involved in the ownership group, you can do that. If you want to do something else, you always have this to fall back on. It's not, though. I mean, that seems like pretty decent parenting right there, to say the least. The club will mark the return of First Division professional women's soccer to Los Angeles after folding of the Los Angeles Soul, the club that featured Marta, Camilla Bila, Mayama, don't know if I'm pronouncing those names right, and a host of other top players lasted one season in the old Women's Professional Soccer League. Shannon Box was Soul's first player, is also involved in the Angel City project. And obviously, if you didn't already know, the NWSL is currently wrapping its return to play tournament with the semifinals of the Challenge Cup in Utah taking place on Wednesday. So, if you're hearing this and this excites you, tune in. You can give them some viewership. The Portland Thorns and Houston Dash will meet in one, while Sky Blue FC and the Chicago Red Stars will meet in the other, and the winner advancing to Sunday's final at Rio Tinto Stadium. So, I just thought this was pretty interesting and pretty cool, just because, one, in sports in LA, I know LA is a big market. Whenever you have any sports league, you want to always have a team in LA, just to be safe. It's a big market, a lot of opportunities. You're going to get people that are going to want to play there, whether they're American people, foreign people, whoever. Just it's a big time city, so people are going to want to be there. Just like same thing with New York. If you have a sports team in New York, in general, it's always maybe more so in New York, because they're a little bit more of a sports town than LA is, because there's a lot of other things to do. Plus, it's never really that cold. In New York, it gets cold, so it's all right, we're not going to be outside. We're gonna go to MSG, see a hockey game, see a basketball game, things like that. You're not just gonna be outside. Where in LA, you could be outside almost 12 months out the year. It never really gets that cold. It gets a little cold. You might have to put a bomber jacket on or something, but it's not never. I don't think it's really ever that bad. I know I was there in January once, and it was compared to what it would have been back on the East. It was a walk in the park. Like I said, just throwing a light jacket at most, and you good money. But yeah, so again, adding an expansion team in LA makes a lot of sense for them. Again, just in terms of a fan base standpoint and a big city standpoint. But again, the things that caught my eye with this were, one, the amount of investors in on this is kind of I know this was with the Mets, Alex Rodriguez and J Lo, they were getting a lot of random. I don't say random names because I don't want to necessarily call these people random, but just they're trying to get a bunch of different investors in on their sales team, as opposed to Steve Cohen's got his own kind of little thing, 'cause he's a billionaire, and I think there's another guy was trying to put in something too. But then apparently everyone wants the Mets now because it can clear there for sale. But yeah, this one was just interesting because again, there's a lot of women on the front lines of this ownership group, which is again a different thing. Like they said, I think it's the first women's backed. I think they said. I'm trying to find it in the article again, but that doesn't. I know I've read it, but it was it's the first. It might be the only women's, mainly women backed ownership group, which is again a big deal in a women's sport, in my opinion, at least. It seems like that'd be a pretty big deal. It's kind of like when you have a similar thing. When you have in basketball, the fact there's only one black owner, and it's Michael Jordan. That's kind of crazy. The fact that I don't think there are any black owners in the NFL, predominantly black sport, is kind of crazy. The fact you have women's sports and there aren't that many women in ownership positions, just in general, is again kind of wild when you really think about it. So it's nice that it's a lot of people, and it's a lot of familiar faces and faces that are going to be out there, going to be able to talk about this, going to be able to lead, and going to, it seems like, want to be involved, which again is a big part of this, because some people just want to own a team. Doesn't say they owned a team, and they don't really care that much about the success or the failure of the team per se. But it seems like, especially when you have a lot of former soccer players that are part of this group, then, and I mean, it's a lot of people, it's 30 people, but it seems like you would have more, you'd have a bunch of people that involved that care. And I think that's the most important thing from an ownership perspective, in my opinion. Again, I don't own a team, but just from what I've seen with good teams and good franchises in other sports, like the level of care and competence in the ownership can trickle down to the rest of the franchise. I'm going to say, look at the dysfunction of the Knicks. All can relatively be tied to James Dolan. Because again, if the top is bad, the rest of the organization is going to be bad. Same thing with Daniel Snyder, as we're seeing. And that's not even talking about the sexual assaults and all the different scandals that he had that just came out last week. But just like on the field, their situation's been, like, they might have a good year here, a good year there, but for most of my lifetime, they've been pretty much a mess. And you can start from the top and go all the way down as to why. So, it seems, and again, when you talk about, when you listen to baseball, a lot of these guys that are getting in are getting into just own a team. They're not, like I said, they don't really care about trying to make it profitable. Even though it's not that profitable, they don't really care about putting big money. I guess I should say they don't really care about putting the best product on the field. When you see situations like where Mookie Betts, arguably one of the best players in the league, gets traded for like, I mean, I don't want to say little, because we really won't know, because they use some young guys, but yet he kind of gets traded off just so they can stay under the luxury tax and don't have to pay that much money, just so they can make a little bit more profit or try to break even, whatever. Like, that's like crazy. Like, that should never be a thing. You have good players on your team, you should want to have good players. So I think when you have again, former players involved, and especially former players that know how hard it is for this kind of league to even get up off the ground. Like I said, there's only 9 teams in the NWSL currently. Again, by the time they enter, it'll be 11. And the league's only been around since 2012, and it only came about after 2 other versions of like a women's professional soccer league failed. So this one's the longest running at this point. So then, yeah, like you know, people are going to be invested in trying to make sure this team is successful and this league is successful. And also, I mean, in theory, again, they're going to be owners now, so we'll see how it goes. But in theory, it'll allow them to try to get the best for the players when it comes to like accommodations and salary and travel and stuff like that, and whatever, and like fields and different things. Like, you would think that, all right, we know how hard it was to even get this league going for this long. So we're not going to try to sit here and try to gyp the players, or try to screw over the players, or try to take down the value of the league and of this franchise in order to put money back in our pockets. Like I said, they got some big time investors. They got the money. Like, that's not going to be the issue. But again, it's like if the guy from Reddit, like, he doesn't know much. I don't know how much he knows about women's soccer. He might be a big fan. Like I said, I don't know. Or some of these, like, again, like these gaming media guys. Like, I don't know how much they know about soccer. But you know that Abby Wambach knows about soccer. You know, Mia Hamm knows about soccer. You know that at least from the looks of it seems like Natalie Portman and all that group, the Evelyn Goria's, the Jessica Chastain, like, they seem invested in this and making it good, and making the team good. So again, that's a good start. And then, so you want people like that. You want people that want to see their team grow and also the league grow and become more successful. And also from what my sister was telling me, because she played soccer when she was younger. She kind of follows us as much as she can. She said that there's a lot of women's soccer players that come from LA, or the LA area, the California area. Just, I don't know exactly if it's from the LA area, but just from California. So again, I think that's the part of the reason why they went there. They know they have a big women's soccer fan base. If you have a lot of talent coming from that area and rising up and playing in the professional leagues or playing on the national team, things like that. I think if you had that, then all right, there's a market there already, and you think it would be a successful market, because again, now you have these, and I think that's one of the big things for women now is the fact there's more leagues and more players readily available you can see that you can look up to and try to want to be like, especially in professional levels. Before, just really just college, like especially in basketball. I'm not to say the WNBA obviously was around, but like I feel like it's gotten bigger recently, and that's been good because then there's more visibility of it. Before, just like you see these people in college, but then after that, they kind of go off and they kind of just forget about them. I know the same thing kind of happened with softball, at least a little bit to me. I don't really know too much about the professional softball league for women that's out there, at least in America. Little similar thing with soccer. Like, I don't know, like you see the national team, which is great, but it's just that, like, all right, you might not be good enough to make the national team. You might be good enough to play professional. And now you see, like, all right, now if I'm from the LA area and I grew up playing soccer and I played all through high school and I want to go to college to play soccer, now there's like, all right, there's people I can strive to be like, because there's a team in my area that I can go out and I can be a fan of and I can support, and I can get my family to support, and then I can then be a part of it, and it'll trickle back to now I can get young girls to come out and support and things like that. Young women get to come out and support and be fans of it. Because I think that's the biggest thing, is that you need to find ways to grow the market or the popularity of it so that it can continue to be successful down the line. If you don't want this league to kind of fade out in a few years. Which, I mean, again, it's been going strong for, I think, like 7, 8 now, so it should be, hopefully it'll be alright, fingers crossed. And the WNBA has been around for, I think, like 20 years now, something like that. So again, not anywhere close to the NFL, NBA, MLB, things like that, but hey, you gotta start somewhere. It's unfortunate it took this long, but you gotta start somewhere. So, again, shout out to all those women and all the people that were involved in this expansion team, because it's just it seemed like a really cool thing, especially, like I said, with all the women that are involved in the ownership group, and again, former players that are involved, and you would think they're gonna want to see, like I said, want to see this team be successful, want to see this league be successful, and they're gonna be invested, they're gonna be involved. I mean, I'm not like overly involved, but like again, they're just gonna be at least invested in the success and/or failure of the team, and the success and failure of the league. So that's always good to see. You want to see people that seem like they're dedicated to the team and aren't just there because they think this is profitable. So it'll be interesting to see, interesting to monitor. But yeah, 2022 in the LA area. Look out. I know my sister played soccer, but she really likes it. She's been trying to get me to watch. I know like you needed like CBS access, so that's kind of like the reason why I haven't watched it, because I don't have it. But yeah, maybe I'll try to find a way to tune into some of the semifinal games on Wednesday, or tune into the final this weekend. Just because, I mean, hey, might as well watch if I can. So, like I said, if you're a fan of women's soccer, you like watching the national team, like seeing them dominate different countries every 4 years or 3 years, depending on like the World Cup and like the Olympics, stuff like that. Then yeah, I mean, you might as well support these women, because they may not be national team good, but they're still really good. Like I said, now you're out in LA. You got another thing for you to do. So there's a lot of stuff to do out in LA. You can just add this to the list. So yeah, should be good. Shout out to everybody involved in this expansion. So before we come back here for the last break, I think it was a Bleacher Report article. Honestly, they were kind of touching on some of like the underrated guys. So everyone's like thinking like, oh, like we're talking about like who's going to be good or who's going to be the reason the team is good in this restart. And from the NBA perspective, it's like, oh, you're always looking at like, oh, like the Anthony Davis or LeBrons or Giannis or Kawhi or Paul George or Russ, Harden, guys like that. But there's going to be some more, I don't want to say lower tier, but some of the more unheralded guys that I think are really going to be vital in helping propel these teams, helping them be successful. Again, only so many teams are going to make the playoffs, and only one team's going to win the championship. But at the end of the day, if there's a team that makes it farther than they're expected to, or there's a team that surprises somebody or upsets somebody in like the first round, something like that, maybe because of the play of some of these guys. So we'll talk about them right after the break. Stay right there.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and One Championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
back here again on the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast Network. So like I said, this was an interesting article I found on Bleacher Report about some of the role players that we could see become stars in this potential restart. And like I said, these are guys that could be a part of the reason why the team makes it to a finals. Or, just as I said, maybe not makes it to the finals. That's a bold thing to have happen. But maybe just potentially goes further than a lot of people think they should or could potentially go. And then again, this could be a springboard for them to kind of, because again, a lot of stars are made in the playoffs, you could argue. And again, Pascal Siakam, for example, was really good last year throughout the season, but then he kind of really showed out in the playoffs as the number 2, and then even, some people argue he could have been, there were some nights where he was the best offensive player, at least on the Raptors, and then he carried that into an early season MVP contention, and then obviously got hurt, but then he's been back and he's been great. Same thing for Fred VanVleet, he kind of was cold, and then all of a sudden he had the breath of his kid, and then all of a sudden he got hot and he just couldn't miss the rest of the playoffs, and that kind of carried over, and now he was really good for the Raptors this year as a starter as opposed to coming off the bench. So yeah, you see different instances of different things like that where guys can kind of make their name or start to make their name in the postseason, and then again have good, successful careers from that, and also again potentially be a catalyst for why their team ends up having a deep run or making the playoffs. Because as good as Kawhi was, as good as Kyle Lowry was most of the playoffs, they don't win without Fred VanVleet shooting, and they don't win without Pascal Siakam and taking the in the instances where Kawhi maybe he was tired, or he was on the bench or something, they need somebody else to do something and attack and score the ball. That's what Pascal did, and he did it at a high level, and then again that carried over. Even though he was good last year, he carried over this year. Now he's an all-star starter. Again, he was in MVP contention. Like I said, stars can be made in the postseason in all sports. But yes, this could be a springboard for these guys to kind of showcase themselves and build on that for the next year and for years to come. So, the first this article again, like I said, this is I don't agree with all of them, but I'll touch on a couple of them that they mentioned, because one guy in Karis LeVert, they had him on there, but I don't really think there's not much for Karis to show. He was arguably the best player for the Nets this year anyway when he was out there, and I mean the Nets team that's out there is not going to be a Nets team that's going to be out there this time next year potentially, or not this time next year, but by the time they start the season up again next year. So whatever he does will be great for them, but I mean I don't expect him to go out there and win them a playoff series like that. I mean if he does, all right, then you're talking about that's their third star right there. But I already think he kind of could be. I say you just need him to just show up and show up. I mean he was in the playoffs last year, so it's not like he's new to the playoffs. He's been in the playoffs before, so there's not they need that experience. But again, if the team was more together, I think he could have been a name on this list, but because of that, I don't really feel like he's an option. But the first name they had on there as a long shot honorable mention was Michael Porter Jr. And while he didn't really hold too prominent a role in the rotation during the year, maybe because of minutes restriction, he was really good when he did play, as is evidence in this article. His raw scoring totals were modest, but he he shot 53.6% on twos and 42.2% on threes. His 7.5 points per game work out to about 19-20. If he was getting starter type minutes per 36, he'd be averaging 19 points a game. And again, that's as a rookie. And I mean, who knows if that would have actually been the case? But if he was on a different team, or a team that didn't need him or needed him more, because in the Nuggets, I mean, they had him, they had Bol just for fun, really. And they didn't really need any of those guys, though. I mean, I could say down the line they're probably going to need a starting. I guess he'd play the 4, once Paul Millsap's out of there, and he could be a guy and he can provide a little bit more offense than Paul can provide at this point in his career, and then Bol just gives them a nice backup big off the bench if you're not going to keep the Plumlee brother around forever. But yeah, just they didn't, neither of those guys were needed this year, as evidenced by the fact that they're doing perfectly fine without them really getting big minutes. And Bol was based in the G League most of the year, and he was very good down there. But Michael Porter Jr. was good in the little bit of time he played, and that's the thing, is that if he is utilized more, maybe potentially in the restart, that could be a boost to this Nuggets offense that they didn't have during the regular season. So, like is evidence in this article, what Porter can do from a scoring perspective is exactly what the Nuggets need. He's getting buckets both within the flow of the offense and on his own accord. He shot 10 of 19 from deep, 52.6% after using 2 or more dribbles, and 15 of 26 from 2-point range inside the last 7 seconds of the shot clock. So he's a guy that can kind of create his own offense and do his own thing when need be. So yeah, just like a guy that kind of can alleviate the burden from like a Jamal Murray having always got to score on his own, or throwing a ball down to Jokic and hoping he can find somebody open or just do his own thing. As having that third guy then kind of create and be a good scorer or legitimate scorer is something that would be very good for them. But again, like who knows? That's why you mentioned him as a long shot. Because Porter's a rookie. Who knows how he'll be used or if he'll be used that much during the restart. Again, you would think they were kind of saving him to try to conserve his minutes, but now he's had 4 months off. I know he's a little banged up throughout the season too. Like nothing too serious, but just little things here and there. But he should be healthy now, you would think. So it'd be interesting to see how that works. But yeah, that's an interesting one, just to see how that's going to go. But another one he had was OG Anunoby of the Raptors, which I think is a legitimate one and a good one, because with no Kawhi and no Danny Green, they kind of going to need a premier perimeter defender out there, just to to try to lock down these top guards that you have, and these are top wing players you have in the East. Again, if you're talking about, not for their team, we're talking about the Celtics. Somebody's got to guard Kemba. Somebody's got to guard Jason Tatum, potentially. Somebody's got to guard Jaylen Brown. I'm trying to think who else. If you're Heat, somebody's got to guard Jimmy Butler. Somebody's got to make sure Tyler Hero's not getting hot. Kendrick Nunn's not getting hot. I'm trying to think, Oladipo, if he plays, because he wasn't going to play, but now he might play. Partly because I think he wasn't going to get his money if he didn't play, so now he might try to play. Someone's going to need to lock him down. So yeah, you just got to worry about different guys. I mean, the Bucks, it's really just Giannis, and I don't think he'll be guarding Giannis, but maybe he could. I mean, he's a little small, but maybe he could. I mean, Kawhi was smaller than him last year, and he did a great job on him. Again, OG Anunoby's not Kawhi, but he's an interesting guy. He wasn't, and that's the funny thing. So he wasn't even able to play in the playoffs really last year. And he wasn't really that good. Good last year's regular season compared to his rookie year, where he was like basically a starter. But it could be a very interesting and needed piece. The Raptors' defense is very good. The Bucks allowed fewer points per possession, and the Chicago Bulls were the lone team to force more turnovers. And the thing with their defense, they don't really have like that all-star guy, as from an all-NBA guy. From a defense perspective, obviously we know Kawhi, no Danny Green. They got Kyle Lowry and Pascal, who are all defensive discussion, but they're not bona fide. Healthy Marc Gasol could do something, but and OG Anunoby, if he's on his game and is healthy, he's probably their best defender, or could be their best defender. He's a player that can kind of stick with anybody, and obviously outside of centers, and has a chance to kind of corral them a little bit. Like I said, he's maybe their best bet to guard Giannis if you're not going to have Pascal on him, because again, now if you have that, then you're just going to tire him out for the offensive end, and he's going to need to be. I mean, not going to need to be the only guy, but he's going to need to be one of the main guys for offense. You would think the Raptors are going to get past the Bucks again. Yeah, it's just like he's a very integral part of the defense. Toronto's defense is in the 84th percentile when he plays and cracks 75th percentile during his stints at the 4. He's great at navigating pick and roll. And apparently Covington, Robert Covington, Justin Holiday, and Matisse Thybulle, the only 3 non-bigs matching his steal and block rate. So again, as a defender, he's canning or he's hitting 38% from threes. So that'll also be important for him and for the future of the Raptors, just because if he can do that, make his shots in the playoffs, and also again play good defense, then again you have to ask Pascal to do, and you have to ask Kyle Lowry to do. They can focus more on the offensive end. Same with like a Fred VanVleet, though he's not like a lockdown defender, but he somebody's got to defend somebody. So then he can focus on the offensive end too, and then you got the other guys that got coming off the bench. That like, all right, when maybe he's out there with them, he can be the guy that is like, look, just let me go out the one one good offensive guy, and then we'll just go from there. And you guys can figure out the offense a little bit. I'll be out there, hit me in the corner if you need me, but he could, again, his defense is really going to where he's going to shine and potentially have the most impact in the return of the NBA. And the last guy I'm going to talk about is Lonzo, because I think he's going to be very important, especially if who knows when Zion's going to be back. So that's going to be important. And Lonzo's also been sneaky, like, very good this year. Obviously, they had Drew Holiday. Brandon Ingram was an all-star caliber player, and then obviously Zion came in mid-season. But, like, Lonzo is a very important part of the team. He helps with the defense. He dictates the tempo. He's a great passer. And he's hitting enough of his shots to where he's not a liability out there on the court, which is important for him. But yeah, so like I think it was said in this article, they mentioned how since December 29th, a stretch spanning 31 games, Ball averaged 14 points, 7 rebounds, 8.5 assists, and 1.6 steals while downing 41% of his threes. His improvement from the deep is especially pivotal. He's letting them rip confidently and quickly off the catch. Almost 40% of his field goal attempts during the stretch have come on spot-up threes, on which he's hitting 42.9%. And obviously much needed development for the Pelicans offense. And then I guess apparently his outside touch is among the many reasons New Orleans mirrors his minutes with those of Zion. 73% of possessions Zion has logged have come beside Ball, who has assisted on nearly 1/3 of his baskets, and the offensive is much more efficient with him on the floor. And again, like I said, he also is versatile enough he's good enough to play good defense on the other end, in my opinion. Yeah, because I think the guy mentioned in the article that only Ben Simmons, I believe, has something close to his steal and so Ben Simmons is the only player matching his defensive rebounding, assists, steal, and block rates, and obviously Ball can shoot the three better than him. So, and with maybe Zion being out, maybe him not being out, but again, he's not going to be able to do everything by himself. Brandon Ingram's not going to be able to do everything by himself. It's just one of those things where you're going to need some other guys to step up. And obviously Drew Holiday's been there before. J.J. Redick's been there before. They have some guys that have been around the block when it comes to playoff. When it comes to the playoffs. But I think Lonzo's going to be one of those important guys because, again, he's vital to the offense and to the defense. He's been good with Zion. He can get him the ball in different positions. He can make sure he's getting his touches. Make sure he stays hot when he's hot. He can again run the pick and roll very well. And again, if he's going to knock down threes the way he's been knocking them down throughout most of the season during the restart, that's going to provide much needed spacing and much needed outside touch. Because again, you can't at this day and age you can't have guys on your team that can't hit threes. Like that's just you can't have too many of those guys on the floor at the same time, or it's going to be hard to score points in the league currently. And like I said, then he's also playing excellent defense. On the other end, he's like, I think, was it like 6'6" or something, so he can guard probably like at least the 1 and the 2, if not even the 3, if need be. If a team goes small. And then, like I said, then he's good with the steals, good with the blocks. So yeah, he's going to be a very vital part of the team, and like I said, everyone's going to be focused on Zion. Everyone's going to be focused on Zion, what he's doing. And I get that. But at the same time, it takes more than just the star to be successful in the playoffs. I mean, well, I don't want to say that. Unless you're LeBron. If you're LeBron, then you can be the one guy and carry a team as he did with his last year in Cleveland. And carry them to the finals. They probably didn't even need to be there. And basically almost won them a playoff game single-handedly if George Hill and J.R. Smith didn't screw up there at the end. Like I said, as we've seen the Bucks last year. All right, like Giannis, there were times where he wasn't that great, but there were also some times where some of the guys didn't always step up around him. It was like one of those things. And even with Kawhi, he was great, but he still had great performances from Kyle Lowry throughout the playoffs, great performances from Pascal, great performances from Serge, great performances from Fred VanVleet. Like, it takes more than just one guy to win a championship. Like I said, if the Pelicans want to get into the playoffs, we're not even talking about winning a championship. Just get into the playoffs. If Zion can play, because again, he's still not back yet, from what I know. But if he can be out there, it's going to take more than just Zion. But that's not going to be enough. I don't think. Again, could be wrong. Basketball is one of the few sports where one dominant guy can kind of change a whole game or change the whole dynamic of a game for you. But Lonzo is going to need to be the guy out there, again, facilitating the offense, running the offense, keeping the tempo going, keeping the pace going, knocking down his shots when he needs to knock them down, which, like I said, he's been doing more this year, especially as we talked about in the article, the last 30-plus games or so before the restart. So, when you win the other guy, we'll have to keep an eye out for when it comes to seeing how the restart affects him. But yeah, if he can do, for the season, he's shooting like 38% on 6.5 attempts. I think I talked about this before. But yeah, he could be one of those guys that is very vital and very important to the success of the Pelicans that isn't like the star. Like I said, him, OG, and maybe like Michael Porter. There's some other guys. I know in this article I mentioned Dante DiVincenzo, who's been good off the bench for the Bucks throughout the season. I'm not sure if he started that many games for them. Another guy like a Matisse Thybulle, a rookie who's getting the start. Now they're bumping Al Horford to the bench and letting Ben Simmons play more of the 4. Those only started years. Dante's only started 22 games. That's what I thought. He's come off the bench a lot, but he's been good off the bench for them. I think it nice gives him a secondary ball handler once they go to their bench squad. But yeah, like Matisse Thybulle, he's going to be very important on the defensive end, guarding some of the point guards, 2 guards. So Ben Simmons doesn't have to. So I guess Shake Milton doesn't have to. Like, he can guard the best perimeter guy if need be. Like I said, that's going to be vital. Flipping over to the West, like we're talking about guys like, the Lakers really going to come down to LeBron and AD with no Avery Bradley out there. But if we're looking at like the Clippers, we're talking about like Lou Will and Montrezl Harrell are kind of the big guys, but those are kind of going to be because you expect, it's really just PG because Kawhi's going to be good in the playoffs. PG has been a little hit or miss. They need him to be good. When you're talking about, let's say like the Rockets, you're looking at like a PJ, not a PJ Tucker, he's not really going to score, but like a Robert Covington or Eric Gordon, kind of this third guy that can score the ball a little bit, and then also from Robert Covington's perspective can kind of lock down on defense so that Russ and Harden don't have to handle too much of the defensive load. Guys like that, you're looking at, like, even if you go down to, like, the Thunder, you're looking at a guy, Shea, obviously, but looking at, like, a Dennis Schroeder, who's been really good for them. That 3-guard lineup with him, Chris Paul, and Shea has been really good for the Thunder throughout the season. So, if he plays well, also now we're talking about them maybe making a sneaky Western Conference run. Something like that. Then you expect Chris Paul to play well. You hope Shea can continue to play well. You expect Gal to play well. Or even like a Dort, who's a guy that kind of came on late, has been starting for them and played really well once he started getting minutes late in the season before the restart hit. So again, you go through different teams. You got a lot of different options out there for potential guys that could be vital, that are, again, a little bit under the radar, that could be, all right, they could take this moment, seize it, and now all of a sudden there are bigger names come this time next year and they grow on that. And continue to grow and continue to grow and continue to build. But yeah, so these, like I said, there's a couple guys. You go through every team and do this, but a couple guys I wanted to highlight that could be the key to success for these teams that aren't, like I said, the at the top billing or like the lead actor on those teams, if you will. They're supporting. They're in the supporting role, but again, they give Oscars and Golden Globes and Emmys to supporting roles too, because they're, in some cases, they're just as, if not more important than the stars, because there's more of them. So if you have a really great supporting actor or actress, that can help propel the show to stardom. As opposed to just, again, you might have good leads, but if it's just them, then the movie's only going to be but so good. You have the good supporting actors, that means you can elevate it from like a good movie to an Oscar-worthy movie, stuff like that. So, yeah. Like I said, don't know how I got into movie comparison, but again, just some unheralded, under the radar kind of guys that could be very vital to their team success come NBA restart time at the Disney Invitational. So we'll see how it goes. We got games this week, and we'll see how these players start to look. And like I said, once next week hits and the games are official, then we'll really get to see. But that'll do it for me here on the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by GSMC Podcast. And I want to thank you guys, as always, for listening to me talk about sports. If you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast if you liked it for today, like you've heard on past episodes. Like I said, make sure you subscribe, make sure you never miss an episode, make sure you're always on top when we drop our latest stuff. Also, if you could please as well give us a 5-star rating, write us a review, wherever you listen to your podcast. Very appreciated. Very helpful. I'll see what you guys like, what you guys dislike about the podcast, where we can improve it, make it better for you guys, make it more enjoyable for you guys, all that stuff. Like I said, just give us a review. It'd be very appreciated. And also, if you're on social media, we're on social media, so we can talk about it there. Also, we can talk there. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We can talk about some unheralded guys you think could be vital for a team success in the NBA restart. Talk about how you think the bubbles are panning out so far. Or if you think they're going to be successful, or you think it's just like a little honeymoon phase. Talk about how you think NFL training camps are going to be different now with the different protocols they have. Mostly, again, with the roster size and no preseason games. No real chance for a lot of these borderline long shot type of guys to get to show off their skills, stuff like that. So any of those things you want to discuss, we're always here to like I said, we're always here to talk, we're always here to discuss. That's what we like to do. We like to talk about sports. You guys like to talk about sports, I imagine. So why not talk about it with us? Hey, we'll always be there to listen. And before I get out of here, I want to take my time, as I always do, to shout out the essential workers. So, like I said, EMTs, doctors, nurses, grocery store workers, retail workers, delivery drivers, post office workers, whoever has been deemed essential. I want to shout out to you. Like I said, you guys do you got to deal with a lot of people that many of us wouldn't want to deal with during this pandemic. You have to do a lot of jobs and things that many of us would not want to be doing during the pandemic. You're on the front lines dealing with a lot of things. And again, I know sometimes it doesn't feel like your work is appreciated, but it is to me, at least. I know you're helping, doing what you can to make sure everybody's safe and we don't spread it more, and it doesn't get any worse in this country than it already is. And also, again, you got to deal with people that may not feel the same way that you do or other people do about the safety of others and how serious the virus can be. Because again, it's not that bad for everybody, but you don't want to find out you're the person that is bad for it. That's not what you want. And like again, this is just the calm before the storm when cold and flu season hits, and now then it gets really bad. Now you don't really know. Now everybody's gonna have to get tested. You don't know if the cough you have or the sniffles you have are from cold, or if they're from the Rona, or they're from the flu. Like you don't. It's gonna be a whole mess. So I don't really look forward to that. But hopefully by then we can have more in control and we'll be better prepared for when that it does hit. Again, we can only hope. But yeah, so like I said, if you wanna just help slow the spread and help making sure that it's not gonna be that bad, and when it gets cold, just wear a mask. That's all I ask. I didn't mean to rhyme there, but it worked. Just wear a mask. Yeah, but that'll do it for me. I've been Chris Blades. That has been my time. And until next time, peace out.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.